Good evening and welcome to the Mudise Network.
Tonight, outspoken and forthright political analyst Professor Contamination is on the couch to tell us how state capture compromised key institutions like the NPA and the Hawks. Later on, Professor Johan Kirsten joins the network as we take stock of land ownership in South Africa and how the private agricultural sector can meaningfully contribute to land reform.
The long-awaited Commission of Inquiry into State Capture finally got underway. It's chaired by the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. This inquiry was established by a proclamation issued by former President Jacob Zuma, who was subsequently ousted by his party, the African National Congress, as the country's head of state. His name looms large in the allegations that are being probed by the Zondo Commission. So far, 5 witnesses have appeared before the inquiry, and the preliminary testimony suggests the pillaging of state resources by a group of people led by the Gupta family. Some of state institutions appear to have been compromised in the process, as charges upon charges were lodged with the police and the highly specialized unit, the Hawks, but no arrests or prosecutions have been made so far. And tonight we ask why this was allowed to happen and whether the damage can be reversed. Professor Contamination has been an outspoken critic of the brazen scheme to undermine the South African government and to loot the state. He joins me on the network. And Prof, pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you, too.
I appreciated that. And I think I'm correct to say you've been an outspoken critic on this matter. And at some point, I think in the interviews we've conducted before, to some you may have come across as a scratched record. But here we are now today.
Here we are. Well, people thought I was personal. I was being too personal, that I didn't like Jacob Zuma. It's not about liking or disliking. It's about the impact that the president has on the republic. There are certain principles that we cannot compromise upon, regardless of how we feel about people.
Yes.
So, well, I've been consistent from the very beginning, and, you know, thankfully I've been proven right.
But tell me, I mean, obviously some people were opposed to your views and were dismissive of what you were saying.
Yeah.
But you were adamant throughout. What were you seeing overall that convinced you that there is something terribly wrong with the state of affairs?
You see, for me, I was surprised at Polokwane that the ANC would elect someone like JZ. He had come out of a trial where he was accused of rape, and there was this trial about to begin to do with Shabir Sheikh, and he was implicated somehow in that. So if you have a president who gets into office with legal problems all over him, because personalities have a way of impacting on institutions. Your concerns, the things that concern you, your personality. Mandela was all about reconciliation because he was that figure, that savior figure. Thabo Mbeki was an intellectual leader, so people were citing poetry, they spoke like him. So his personality influenced the organization of state and the narrative generally. So if you have JZ then with legal problems, obviously, it means that he would use the state for his own protection. That is why you'd had a securocratic presidency, because from the very beginning he was in trouble, right? Soon after Polokwane, they had to disband the Scorpions, because the Scorpions had pursued him, right? And they had to influence him to drop the charges. But there was always a possibility, obviously, that these things would come back at some point. So he was always playing defense. The appointments into security departments were done in a way that those who were there would protect him. You know, so for me it was obvious, and of course in political science we do have what is called patrimonialism, personalized rule. That this person, I mean, JZ doesn't make a distinction between private and public life. Right? If he thinks that, for instance, at some point he says, growing up, we used to beat up homosexuals. You don't say that as a president. You might have your own prejudices, but with JZ, you can't make the distinction. So his own personal issues, personal problems were infused into the state from then onwards, because he is what he is. He cannot change himself. Then we're geared for major problems ahead, and we did experience those.
And of course, you can't blame him alone. There are many names that are being thrown about at the commission. Let's take a step back then and look at this commission. As I said at the very beginning, that he is the one who said this commission of inquiry should be established. And of course, a couple of weeks later, a few weeks later, a few days later, he was ousted as president. So, you know, tell me about the terms of reference and the whole political drama around the fact that his name is looming large, and yet he's the person who established this commission.
Well, I mean, JZ didn't really want the commission. Initially, when the idea was first mooted, he said the commission, if it is instituted, it must go back to pre-1994 to investigate all state capture, to open it up, right? When in fact Thuli Madonsela's recommendation was that there are specific allegations that have to be probed. So she was specific. They wanted a commission that was open-ended, which would have taken years to complete, right? But the ANC obviously had to take a decision, particularly because there was a lot of pressure coming. Because there were these allegations that were surfacing, the ANC had to do something, and of course they were forced into doing it. And with him staying as president, obviously it wasn't going to work, because even though he had allowed for the commission to be set up, he was always going to find some ways, maneuver somehow to frustrate it. I mean, it took quite some time, for instance, to appoint Zondo. It took even longer to have terms of reference and this and that. But ultimately, I think it was the public that forced the ANC to do this. And for me, Tim, is one of the questions we need to pose here is the role of the ANC, the role of cabinet. Surely these things people talk about. I mean, Themba Maseko was saying there were rumors. You know, people were talking that one was forced to do this, the other was forced to do that. Ministers were summoned. So ministers were complicit in this thing. We'll still hear evidence probably from Mutambi and others who, if they are honest enough, will admit to these things. So the point is, cabinet knew this was happening. And if cabinet knew, the ANC knew, the entire ANC knew, why didn't they do something to rein him in? So ultimately, this is not a JZ trial. It involves the ANC. Because the ANC, Jacob Zuma is a deployee of the ANC, right? And they say they practice collective leadership. They are complicit in this entire fracas.
So, but still, in the South African public's mind, people are asking, you have this commission, so what? And they look at the fact that the Hawks and other institutions of state never investigated when charges were laid with them. And they are asking, what is the intent of this thing? Is it intended to be a whitewash? No, going back to the terms of reference, from where you're sitting, ultimately, what are we likely to learn? What is it that the country is trying to achieve through the work of Deputy Chief Justice Zondo?
We have to determine whether the Gupta brothers exerted any form of influence over the president in terms of influencing his decisions, in terms of allocation of tenders, business. So there must be a trail. What I like about Justice Zondo from the very beginning, this happened with Jonas's testimony actually. He insisted on actual evidence. There was a time when Jonas could not provide specific details. He said, would you mind writing it down? Go back and think about it, because ultimately when he does make findings, he cannot make findings based on hearsay or rumor. It's got to be factual. So he's going to follow the trail of evidence and make recommendations as to who did what. One of the questions he had asked, I think yesterday, was that to Themba Maseko, do you know of any ministers who went to Saxonwald, right? And the point is, you have to identify them and then investigate whether or not there were any questionable contracts that came from that ministry to the Guptas. So he is following the trail. There will be evidence, and we hope the report down the line will show that Minister A did A, B, C, and D, issued this to the Guptas on this date, and that tender was worth so much. This is what was wrong about the tender because it didn't follow procedure. All those things, so far, there is no reason to believe that it will be a whitewash because of the rigor of the questioning, because of the demeanor of the judge. I think they couldn't have chosen a better person for this. He's very calm. You think that you are confessing to your own uncle or your priest. Calms you down nicely. So far, Tim, I mean, this is about the third, fourth day.
Well, yeah, well, I was just about to ask you the question that it's still early days of the commission, right? And it's going to sit in 2 years, but I suppose the hearings will be done completed pretty soon. It's the compilation of the report that might take a bit longer. What do you make of what has been revealed so far, and some of the people who've appeared before the commission, what they told the world about the shenanigans?
For me, what struck me, Tim, is the fact that A.J. Gupta, for instance, felt entitled to loot government resources. For instance, Mcebisi was saying when he refused to play ball, this fellow threatened Jonas. He got angry. He didn't think that Jonas had any right to refuse him. There was a strong sense of entitlement, an overwhelming feeling that he was in charge. So who the hell are you not to refuse my instruction, right? So that tells you how confident they were. That tells you that they were in charge. The executive authority, the president, his authority had been surrendered to them. For instance, they said, if you don't, go and tell the ministers, they were saying this to Temba, go and tell the ministers that they should give their budget for advertising to you, right? If they refuse, you come and tell me, I will call Baba, JZ that is, and JZ will sort them out. So they told JZ, I mean, he was their lackey. He was their lackey. Take Temba's situation, Maseko. He refused to do what they wanted him to do. The next thing, he was fired. There you are.
Confirmed.
There you are. Yeah. That these fellows, I mean, it means that executive authority had relocated from Mahlamba-Ndlovu to Saxon World, that they were in charge.
So, I mean, as an analyst, observer, citizen, on top of that, I suppose, you know, when you do away with all the stuff of being a teacher of politics, an analyst, and just relate to what was unfolding, what we now know, but what you knew and suspected before. How does it make you feel when you think about it?
Furious, because I'm a nationalist. You know, I'm a nationalist. I'm very aware of the history of this country, where we come from, what people had to do for us to be free, right? They died for this freedom. And here you have foreign nationals. That they come in, Jay. Within a year or two of arriving, they take over executive authority. Where's our sense of pride as a people?
But now, we've got a powerful political organization, the liberation movement, the ANC. It holds conference upon conference. There are policy conferences, decisions of this nature. We have a constitution. We've got the separation of power. We've got all sorts of things, the judges that we're talking about, the parliament that we're talking about, the public protector. I mean, for you, what does it say then? I mean, how is it possible to compromise an entire system like that?
That's the disappointing part, because our republic came through a revolution, a heroic revolution, people who sacrificed their lives. We tend to hero worship those individuals because they gave up their lives for our cause. So we have great affection for them. And we think that they wouldn't do any wrong. They wouldn't bring any harm to the republic. So for them, for JZ to sell their country like this, he sold it, literally, right? So it tells us that individuals are fallible, Tim. That as much as we like people, we have to insist on the application of rules, and that institutions should prevail over individuals. Everything must be done through a proper process. You can't make informed decisions. You can't appoint people simply because you like them. Everything has got to be procedural. Once you have that, you show up the institutions, the rules, and leaders have to behave in an exemplary manner as a leader. You can't just behave as if you don't have a responsibility. Because with JZ's bad example, most people rather in the public service became corrupt. Because they knew that corruption, if you are not corrupt, you would be fired. Because, you think you're smart, you're not a thief. So you would inform on us. So if you had debt on you, if you had also stolen, you were safe. They were safe in your company because they know that if they get arrested, they will squeal on you as well. So you all go to prison. So it means good people who simply wanted to do their jobs, were fired. Not because they were incompetent, but because they were honest. Themba Maseko is a prime example of that, and at some point he couldn't even buy his house now, right? Because, so good people suffered because of corrupt president who led by example and ended up contaminating the entire public service.
I'm talking to Professor Mcebisi Ndlechana. We're talking about the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture and the implications of what is happening there, the testimonies and the intent, ultimately, of this commission. And you too can take part in our conversation on social media. The hashtag is the Mudise Network. We continue our conversation in a moment.